All right, welcome back. This conversation, we're just going to jump right in. Let's go.
Well, what I see now, so first of all, I was an actress, and I didn't even move to New York until I was 25. So I was already old for that industry. But yeah, I mean, that's just a reality of that industry. And what I started to realize about myself as I got into my mid 30s was that I wanted more control over my creativity, over my life. I had headshots that showed me looking a certain way. And if I was going to walk into an audition, I had to look like that headshot. So if I wanted to change my hair, that meant investing in new headshots. If I wanted to go on vacation, it meant possibly missing an important call for an audition. I constantly felt like I was at somebody else's beck and call and not able to have real control over my life. And that's the part of it I didn't like anymore. What I realize now in that self-talk that I was doing about getting up there, I look back at my 40s now and all the health issues that I had and all the complaining I was doing. I realized that my self-talk was, I mean, your body reacts to that stuff. I do believe that. I think, yeah. And no wonder I felt awful, because I was saying awful things to myself. Just, I was saying things like, oh, and this is something we all buy into, by the way. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Society in general, advertising is all anti-aging. Um, we don't, if you think about it,
Specifically for women.
Yeah. When you're growing up.
Men too, but specifically for women.
Yeah. Yeah. And when they don't really advertise to middle-aged people either. They're generally, if you're looking at primetime TV, we don't exist.
Not the demo.
And, right. And if we do exist, it's help, I've fallen and I can't get up, or Rogaine or Botox or this pill or that pill.
Viagra. Like, you're broken. You're broken. Like, you're broken. In the way, you're broken.
Right. And as a child, if you think back, I don't know about you guys, but certainly for me and a lot of friends I've talked to recently, when I was a child, I pictured myself growing up and being in my 20s, maybe my 30s, and thinking of that vibrant time, right? And that career and and maybe having kids and maybe being married and all that stuff. And then there's like this gray area or a blackout kind of thing. And then all of a sudden you can picture yourself maybe being old, right? But that midlife swath of territory is not visualized. There's no rites of passage, except for maybe the very depressing over the hill 50-year-old birthday party.
Which is always like a punchline and not really celebrated. But
right.
Yeah.
Right. It's depressing, frankly. And reading Mel Robbins' book and instituting that 5-second rule, and really for me, getting up early, setting my alarm across the room, which is something she recommends. So I have to put my damn feet on the ground before I can hit a snooze button. Just setting up that little tiny thing for making yourself get out of bed. And then I committed to meditating and exercising. I was like, I can do this for 30 days. Let's just see what happens. What happens if I change this habit? And I changed up my diet too. And it was just like a 30-day experiment. What would happen if I tried this? And I just changed my habits. And changing those habits was like, bam. My energy, my attitude, everything changed. And I suddenly started getting excited about the next 30 years. And I'd been saying for forever, oh my gosh, time is going so fast. I feel like I'm going to wake up tomorrow. I'm going to be 80. I still feel like that. time is just going by so fast. But now I'm kind of excited about what the next 20 to 30 years could look like if I stay healthy. And if I do something I love and I feel makes a difference in the world, it's pretty exciting.
There's a book called The Psychology of Belief that talks about how cells process information and the receptors in a cell that receives external. It's all about epigenetics, the study of environment on our cellular maturation and all that stuff. And he calls them perceptors. And it's not that they're receiving information, it's how they perceive the information. And depending on how they perceive the information will determine how they react. And it's very much a cellular, how we perceive the information is how the protein will react, not so much what the information actually is. So if we look at the world in a very negative, pessimistic, the world is out to get me, it will affect how we act and how we breathe, how we breathe every day. And when we make those changes, it changes the way we see the world. It changes then the way we act in the world. And I think it's awesome. I think that's a cool space to travel. And I'm very curious on that line is you had this moment when you had the first layoff. It's like, I want to do photography. At what point during the 40s did you realize that you actually get energy from telling stories? Like, how did you make that transition and come to that realization?
So I knew right away that my favorite thing to do is to take candid photos. I loved being at like family events and parties and just taking pictures of people talking to each other, laughing together, capturing those moments. And technically, like to be a service photographer, which is what I am, I did a lot of family photography and headshots and things like that. um you know for family photography, a lot of times what people want is photos of them looking just so, and looking at the camera and smiling. And there's a certain technical skill that goes into that of being able to pose people and get the lighting right and do everything, and that's good. But in the end, I find that kind of photography a little bit boring. What I really like is stirring the pot a little bit. If I'm doing a family session, I'll do a couple of those photos that are camera aware, because everybody, it's nice to have that for the Christmas card. But what I really love to do is get kids engaged and playing, and parents playing with their kids. And it's even then it's a little staged. It's a little, there's some direction I give people to get them to do that. But that's where the whole thing lives for me. And even in doing headshots with people, what I love about headshots, which seem you're like, where's the story there? What I really love about it is the one-on-one. It's very much like doing a podcast with somebody and having a one-on-one conversation with them, is getting somebody to engage with me and my camera and letting their guard down for just a moment, where I really get the engagement, where the eyes match the mouth if they're smiling, where it's not just a cheesy smile and the eyes are dead. But if I can just get that little moment where I actually see them, then I feel like their story's being told, if that makes sense.
So I asked this question because a lot of times we go into the cycle you talk about when you're a kid and you think about the future, and we what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? It's like, I have no idea. I haven't done enough things, right? But what you come to realize, and you can see this through, I often correlate it to sports. It's like, oh, I would love to play sports. It's like, okay, what is it about sports that you like? I actually don't like this, or this, but this is what I like. Oh, it's actually might be better because I really like being a part of it, or maybe I want to be a columnist or an agent, or all of the other aspects that go into it because of how the thing that we actually like isn't the external function, it's the what that external function enables within us, right? And like loving to tell stories, photography is that medium, but the love is the telling of the story. Getting to that point is really, really hard because we are not given skills to figure that out. So how did you get to that point? And how long did it take, or was that pretty instantaneous for you?
Well, I knew that I liked the candids right away, but it was harder to figure out how to incorporate that into the photography. So I would
Yeah.
say it took a long time.
Yeah.
It took a long time. I would do it more with, like I said, hanging out at family functions, and everybody was very patient with me. But in the end, there was this little golden maybe 4 or 5 years. My husband has a big family. I always say I won the in-law lottery. That we had this big family, and all the nieces and nephews were younger then. They're grown up now and graduated college. My kids are on the younger end of the spectrum for our family. So it's harder now because we're not together as much. But for about 5, 6 years, for Christmas every year, I would put together a photo book of everything that we had been together all year. I'm getting verklempt. And that's where I was telling our story, And then, going through that change that I went through with the 5-second rule and establishing my morning routine and figuring out that I suddenly had all this pent up energy and curiosity about what was next. Like, I thought, okay, if I stay healthy, if I've got 30 years left, if I make it to 80 or beyond, I don't see myself ever totally retiring especially if I get to do something I love. But what might that be? Do I want to be a photographer when I'm 70 or 80, schlepping a camera and all the gear around? Maybe not. I'm pretty physical when I'm doing photography, especially when I do it in a storytelling kind of way. So
I just envision you like elbowing people.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
Move,
Like
I gotta get
getting
the
up
shot.
in there. Like, I can
I'm
totally
lying
see
down
it.
on the
Yeah,
ground.
yeah.
I'm climbing up
Yeah.
on things. I've been at weddings. I was at a wedding once, and I got so excited that it was the dance floor time, and that's like my favorite time to take the photos, is because people start to let loose. And I got up on this stool and I'm like taking a shot because I wanted to get it from like a bird's eye view kind of thing. And the next thing I know, I'm falling, and one of the wedding guests is holding me up. It's great. I'm crazy. Yeah.
Well, it was nice of them to hold you up.
It was. It was
Yeah.
very embarrassing.
I can hear because you're very calm, but the energy spike when you start telling that story, when you start talking about photography, is very apparent.
Yeah, it's funny when I have the camera in my hand. I always say, especially if I'm doing a big group and I got to get that whole big group together, I just warn them in advance. I'm like, listen, I'm really bossy with a camera in my hands. At which point, my husband likes to say, "With a camera in your hands," because it turns out maybe I'm bossy more often than that. Yeah, maybe, But I get excited. If something's going well in a photo session, especially if I take a shot and I know I caught that moment, if I know I got it, I literally get the shivers, and I'll be like, and people just start laughing. I am a goof behind the camera. It's kind of crazy.
So you made the realization, though, that you might not want to be doing that when you're 80.
Right. And that's when I got to go back, because when I was really when I was in my mid 30s and I was thinking, well, if I'm not going to be an actress, what would I be? I don't really know. I was listening to This American Life I don't know if you guys know that show on NPR. I was a loyal listener to that show, and it fascinated me. And I love the way they tell stories. And I thought, I'd love to do that. I would love to tell people's stories, because I loved the way that they told stories from such a human level, and that you get the feeling that everybody has a story worth telling, and I do believe that. But I didn't know how I was going to make that happen at my age. And does that mean I have to go back to school for broadcasting? How am I going to become a radio producer? What do I even do? I got myself a little mini disc recorder. I got myself a shotgun mic. I kind of dabbled in it, but then I had kids, and that is a whole thing in and of itself. And I gave my full attention to that. And kind of lost the thread on that radio production idea. And then this thing, when I got excited about the next 30 years, when I was approaching 50, the podcast idea came up. And I now see that it's all totally related back to that germ of an idea that I had in my mid 30s of everybody has a story to tell that's worth telling. And what if I were to tell stories of other midlife people who have been where I am, where they feel stuck and they've worked through it and they found their way through to the other side. And if I could tell that story and inspire other people,
I love it. I love it. And thank you for just being raw about it, because it's a great example of what we were just saying about the underlying understanding of telling stories. Because once you figure that out, like that 30 something you, it's very easy to go, I can't do this broadcasting thing, therefore I'm never going to tell anybody's story. But then you find photography and you're able to channel that energy in an avenue that now lets you have the flexibility to have this podcast thing and to do all of these things, and who knows what's next, so long as you're telling people's stories. And no longer, the limit isn't the thing, it is yourself at that point, right? So I think it's awesome.
And even more so, or along with that, Keith, I think attachment to the thing. Because I think we limit ourselves by I am a sales rep, I am an actor, I am. It's like, no, I do that and I like it, but like going that layer deeper of why am I an actor? What is it I love about this? Oh, I love the story. Oh, it turns out I can get that fix
100
from 100,000 places.
right. Like I started to think about, gosh, what would happen if I lose my sight? How am I going to take pictures? If I just am, if I can't get around the way I do now. But you know what I figured out now is I'll just continue to tell stories. The technology, it just depends on, there's so many ways to do that. Podcasts didn't exist back when I was thinking about This American Life and telling radio stories. Podcasts weren't a thing. And all of a sudden, there's this technology available to us. There's no gatekeepers. It's one of the things I love about photography and podcasting. As an actress, there were gatekeepers everywhere. I love acting, and my favorite thing is the rehearsal process. I love being in, figuring it out, being in the process. How do we tell this story? But you can't do that until somebody casts you. You can't do that until somebody else gives you permission to tell that story. And with a camera or a microphone and all this gear that I have, I can do it whenever I want to. It's amazing.
So there's an undertone here of something that we've talked about a lot, is the story that we were told growing up that led us to this space, and then we had to find it at a certain point. Some people earlier than others, and so on. What was it Well, what was that story that, yeah, I mean, you started acting at 25, like you said, it was late. So up to that point, like, what was it like for you that, maybe got you starting acting late and got you interested in it to begin with? What was,
Yeah, well, actually, I started acting much earlier than that. It's just that I didn't start doing it professionally. I didn't make the move. Since I was 6 or 7, I wanted to move to New York, and specifically to New York. I mean, I grew up in El Paso, Texas. Most of my friends, I went to college for acting. Um, I knew what I wanted to do. I had done some in high school, and then in college, that's where I really was like, boom, show after show after show, full-time school, full-time shows. It was nonstop. Um, what ended up happening is I got married right out of college. Um, and my husband, this was a first marriage, and it was to somebody I'd been friends with in high school. He's a great guy. Um, what happened is he wanted to be a police officer, and I didn't want him to be a police officer in New York City. And I don't think he did either. And we decided to move to Denver, Colorado as a place to move to, that we both felt like it was kind of a cool city and all that. And when we got there, I started doing theater right away, community theater, but really good community theater, like terrific. And I did show after show after show after show. And I now, looking back at this, I realized that I must have been very absent from that marriage. And he did not like that I was doing so much theater, even though he knew that that was my dream. Um, and he didn't like my theater friends. And we ended up divorcing after about 4 years. And that was when I was in my mid 20s. And I realized if that this was my moment to move to New York if I was going to ever do it. And I did not want to be, again, 80 seems to be a big number in my head. I didn't want to be 80 in a rocking chair. Another image in my head that, classic.
you got
old
your
person in the
shawl
rocking
or
chair.
your knitted blanket.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I didn't want to be 80 and regretting that I had never taken that chance. So I ended up working really hard for a year, doing a lot of overtime at the job I was at, and saved up a good chunk of change, and then sold just about everything I owned and moved to New York. And no regrets, man. I seriously.
Did you have any issue making that decision? Like, was that a hard decision or?
No, because it's everything I had ever wanted. It was scary. I mean, but I was mostly excited. I didn't know anybody in the city. I had one connection, a playwright whose plays I had done in Denver. He and his wife lived in the city, and I didn't have a job, but I had saved up money. So I ended up going up to my aunt's house in Maine, go figure, to stay there over the summer for a month, actually. And I thought, if I stay there for a month, and then I talked to that one person I knew and said, "Can I stay with you for a week while I look for an apartment?" And he and his wife very graciously took me in for a week. Stayed in their place in Greenwich Village, and I just tromped around the city. This is pre-internet. I went to this random place in Midtown that was a roommate service, where they had these huge binders full of sheets of paper that other people had come and filled out on paper and pen, and flipped through these binders looking at neighborhoods and people that were looking for roommates. And I found a roommate that way. It was crazy. And he turned out to be, first of all, it was a guy. He turned out to be just this amazing roommate. We got along so well. I'm sure my parents were plotting. I would have been as a parent, now that I think about it. But I think about everything I did, and yeah, and it was not a great neighborhood in Brooklyn. I will tell you that at the time. Now it's nice. It's gentrified or whatever since then, but it was not. You know, it was not a great neighborhood, but he was fantastic. And when I moved in, I found a little temp job right away that turned into a long-term position, and was still flexible, so I could go out and audition. I got a show within the first month I was there. It was like, boom, I was off and running, and everything just fell into place. It's that thing of leap and then the net will be there. So,
But it's not there until you leap, so you can't see it. What? So when you talk to your kids or others that haven't yet reached their midlife doldrums, like how do you or how would you prep them for?
I would say visualize what you want your life to look like. See if you can bring some intentionality to what you want that to be. Because until, how can you get something unless you can picture it? I pictured New York City in my brain my whole youth. I could see myself living in the city, going to auditions. And then I would walk around the city after I was there and I'd be like, oh, I live here. I live here. It was amazing. And if I hadn't been able to see that in my mind's eye as a young kid, how would that ever happen?
Did you ever visualize, do you think that was a limiting factor to your 40s and why it was harder for you? Because you kind of alluded to it, but you had no visual for what that looked like.
I had no visual, especially for the first, before I found photography, I had no visual. I did not know. I mean, I loved being a mom. It changed me essentially, though. I was never a worrier before. I was suddenly a worrier. And I didn't recognize myself. And I didn't know where I was heading. No clue. No clue for at least 5 years.
And then you take those first 5 years of parenting, and it's just like, what is happening right now?
It's just a wash.
Right?
I
Every
mean,
day.
it's
like, yeah.
Right. There's a podcast called The Longest Shortest Time.
The Longest Shortest Time.
Wasn't there a podcast
The Longest Shortest Time?
The Longest Shortest Time, where I would tell myself, I mean, I would tell myself, don't wish this time away. Don't wish it away.
I was just getting ready to ask you, what would you say to other moms that in that 5 years, like in that period where they don't recognize themselves? It's really hard to look at yourself and not see yourself.
Yeah, it is. It's isolating. Once the kids started school, we moved to my husband's hometown, and I didn't have any connections here either, except for his family, who again I love, but I didn't have anything that was mine except for my little family. So it can be very isolating to be a young parent, especially if you're home with your kids. There's a lack of adult conversation other than with your spouse, and and then you're putting everything on them. All your eggs are in that basket. That's a lot of pressure, on them. Kind of crazy.
So that's an interesting pivot point in your life. Was it, because it's sometimes hard to look back. It's like, oh, those were wonderful times. I was a mom, I was a parent, and I really enjoyed it. But that shift and loss of self, would you say it took you 15 years to work through that, or were there little wins along the way?
Oh, there were certainly little wins along the way. I mean, I always say that it's that being a parent is the best and hardest thing I've ever done. Those little arms around you and that connection, that physical connection when they're little. You start off. I mean, I'm going to get really verklempt. As a woman, they're inside you, and then they're on you. Literally all the time. And it's wonderful. I mean, it's this it's animal, right? And then they start to get go away a little bit and come back, as they get older. Poop, 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 poop. And then there's this independence that takes over. And that's exciting too, you know? When they started talking, oh my gosh, we can talk to each other now. Wow, I can hear what's going on in that brain. It's every step along the process is amazing.
That it is.
Yeah.
Frankly, I put off having kids for a long time, not just because I was pursuing the acting career, but also because I was terrified of teenagers. Just like, oh my God, I don't want to have teenagers.
And here you are.
And
you have them now.
Boom.
How do you feel about it now?
Here I am.
Or should I ask you in 5 years?
Yeah, ask me in 5 years. No, they're great. I have good kids. And this year was a bonus year in a weird way because here we are together. And, as teenagers, they don't want to be hanging around us that much. But for us, it was like, wow, this is bonus time of having them here with us.
That is pretty awesome.
Pretty awesome.
Would you say that, because this is something I always like to understand, it seems like you had a pretty strong support structure growing up to be able to just kind of live the life you wanted to live step by step.
Yeah. What's great about my parents is that they did not dissuade me from being an actor, which, I mean, there's a lot of friends that I've had where their parents were like, oh no. Right. And they said, get your education, make sure you get that degree. And they taught me a really good work ethic. So I had that. I worked my whole way through college. I stayed home for college, worked a full-time job, went to school full-time, and then did theater at night. And then would leave rehearsals and go study and get some, diner. So I could stay awake and then go home and sleep and get up in the morning and go work and do it again. It was crazy. But so they taught me a really good work ethic, and they did support me. And also, man, they were strict. My parents were strict. Every Saturday was chore day, and you didn't get to go do anything else until the chores got done. I'm a little more lenient.
I respect that.
I don't know if I don't know if I've done my kids a service because I've not been as strict about that. But also I saw them work really hard. Yeah. So it wasn't just talk. It wasn't, they both worked really hard.
I think most of what I remember about my parents is the things that they did and that stuff that imprinted on me the strongest, I guess, is. So I get that.
Yeah, I remember getting, my dad would be up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, mopping the floor before he'd go to work, cleaning the bathrooms. He was a great cook. And my mom, she went and started an insurance business. She became an insurance agent first of all, she had not finished, she didn't finish college. I remember in her 40s, when I was probably maybe preteen or early teens, she went back to school to try to get her associate's degree. So they valued education. My dad had also gone back to school because neither of them had a degree. They had both gone back to try to make that happen while raising us, while working. So to see them do that probably made a huge difference.
That's good. Well, I don't know how long it's going to take to answer our final question, so I want to pay heed. But before we do, Rodney, do you have anything else you wanted to ask? Any other questions?
I've I'm in a really contemplative mood today, so I'm listening and just kind of taking it all in. But thank you.
Thank you. It's my nose. I can't even see myself. I turned off my camera, but my nose must be bright red right now because you guys have made me all gushy.
Can't tell. It's the internet camera, so it's a little grainy on my side, but I don't think so. Rodney,
all right.
Just no, I really appreciate it. It's funny just that how the universe delivers timely conversations for things happening in our lives and our families' lives, and I'm really feeling that right now. So I feel just a lot of gratitude for what you walked us through and what you shared, and I actually haven't taken this many notes in a long time because it's a lot I think I can apply personally and for my family. So thank you. And our final question is, what does compassion mean to you?
I think compassion is it's tricky. I think it means accepting people for who they are without letting them settle for their limitations. Yeah, I think compassion is like what I used to think compassion was just feeling for somebody, maybe more empathy, right? But I think compassion really is seeing possibility in people beyond maybe what they can see for themselves, and standing up for that. Not letting somebody fall under the weights of their own limiting thoughts.